Okay, so just be aware, folks, we're recording the Tasman site meeting this month. So um, we were finding that with the transition to doing offsite site meetings, we had some of our site meetings that were staying up around kind of 40, 50 people, sometimes as high as 70. And we had a couple others that had dwindled down and we were getting, 10, 15, less than 20 folks, particularly at the heading site meeting, the Charcot site meeting, and Burger Drive. Particularly, I think a lot of the folks that used to attend the Burger Drive one now attend the Tasman site meeting here. So in an effort to, be efficient with time and get the site meeting count a little higher so that we were in the same ballpark for all the meetings, we consolidated those three site meetings, the Charcot Burger Drive and 70 West Heading. That likely won't be something that continues whenever in 2024 we can eventually all meet in person again. Who knows when that's going to be. So at some point we'll return to on-site site meetings, right? And then we'll split those back up. But at least for the time being, those are going to remain consolidated for the off-site Zoom site meetings. And we're continuing, of course, to record one per month. We're recording this Tasman site meeting this month, and that's always up on YouTube. If you ever miss one, you can catch it there. And we've discussed before, by popular request, whenever we are back on site, we'll continue the practice of recording one site meeting per month, even when we're all back in person. It's been a popular thing since COVID started for folks. They like the ability to go back and review later. So we'll find some kind of rotation for that once we're all back on site. And as always, you're welcome to attend a different site meeting if you would like to. The difference will be, we usually try to have, specific information if we're speaking to folks at the hospital, right? We'll spend more time on the hospital budget or SSA or more folks on TSS issues when we're at Tasman, right? But, generally I would say 75, 80% is going to be applicable no matter where you are in the county. There's rarely that much specialized info to talk about any given site meeting.
That's right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, and I was just going to say, if you want to jump onto the budget, I know we posted the documents last time. I can go look and pull those again if you'd like me to post in chat.
Great. Yeah, I just posted in chat the agenda for today, which I'll just briefly overview, and then we'll hop right into the budget. I know people have a lot of different questions, or people have historically been emailing and texting Adam and I on a lot of these items. So we're talking about the county budget, as well as the workshops that happened this week and last, the voluntary separation incentive program, and an update on some of the numbers as well as participation, the limited layoffs and aftermath, as well as our meetings that we're planning on conducting. In fact, I have 2 later today with people who have been impacted by that, which is about a dozen people at this point. So not huge impacts in terms of numbers. The class study committee, that is our new language. Our new language. Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and mute everybody. Everyone has the ability to Hopefully I am unmuted right now.
You are.
Okay, good. Okay. Where was I going with this? And the meetings that we plan to have with individuals that have experienced a layoff notice. As I mentioned, I'm meeting with 2 people later today, 2 separate meetings, each with 2 people. I believe I've met at this point with everyone from my areas that have received a layoff notice, or at least talked to them. But we are willing to do anything that you guys need to further explain that process. The class study committee, we have some direction from the board and additional updates on that new language. Lobbying effort that we've engaged in this week. Many of you may have seen us this week and last at the board, and we were able to save or defer some cuts for people. And then, of course, ongoing reorganizations. So I'll jump in then. It sounds like, Adam, you're going to be posting some of the budget documents, okay, in chat. I'm going to hop on the county budget. So where are we with the county budget? Well, we're still experiencing a significant shortfall. That shortfall was initially estimated at about $300 million. That has now increased to somewhere, and it's an estimate at this point, somewhere in the neighborhood of $500 million. So what does that mean, and how is the county addressing that? Well, they're addressing it in a number of ways. One is VISIP, which we'll talk about in a moment. Two is increased funding. Okay, so what does that mean? That means one-time funding, and it also means that part of the budget was anticipating a depression in property tax values. Interestingly, that has not happened. Property tax assessments have actually increased. They've not increased by as much as we would normally anticipate. For those of you that are very familiar, maybe we even have some members that are on this call from the assessor's office. The assessor typically estimates a 3% increase in property assessment evaluation for property taxes. This year, it looks like it's going to be going up by 1%. So we were actually anticipating a drop in property taxes revenue, which is not happening. We're seeing an increase, just a lesser increase than we would hope, right? Not that we anticipated, but than we would hope. So that impacts the budget to a lesser extent than we thought. So some of that 1% is going to be funneled towards a deficit as we just correct what an amount of the deficit is. The 300 million I mentioned earlier, this all has to be taken in context. We have an operating budget of in the neighborhood of $6 billion. So that's a huge budget. 300 million is a huge number. That's a big percent of that, right? So we're also looking at one-time funds, which is what the board has decided to use for much of the for much of this cycle, getting us through to the new year. And also, the board is looking at deleting vacant funded positions, as well as approximately 150 positions throughout the county that are filled, mid-teens of which are SEMA. So we're seeing 8-9 positions from TSS. We were originally seeing 5 positions from the CEO's office, 4 or 5 positions from the assessor's office. And Adam, what were you seeing from your areas in terms of layoffs?
So you just had the bad luck to have all the actual impacted layoff folks. There's lots of vacancies being cut in my areas. We're seeing about 13 million or so worth of vacancies, for example, from health and hospital. On the other hand, some areas that were hit particularly hard during the previous rounds of cuts are not being hit really at all this time. So that would be, our public safety and justice departments, the sheriff, probation. As folks may or may not recall, the sheriff absorbed about 50% of the cuts that came out during the August supplemental budget. So that's about, I think, $49 million. They lost pretty much every vacancy they had already. And then some other areas we're just not seeing cuts when there's further insulation from the general fund. So departments like Valley Health Plan, for example, where they just they mostly have their own revenue streams. So it's good news in some areas, bad news in others. A bit of a mixed bag right now. But I think that the main thrust is and I think this is what we're hearing from the Board of Supervisors and Jeff at the budget hearings, which is that this is a step one. Maybe this is sufficient to be prudent right now, but everyone's already got their eye on February and what's going to be coming at the next junction for a look at the budget. Go ahead, Zip.
That's right. And what did you just posted in chat a link to what
yes.
there, Adam?
So that was in there. You'll see a list of all vacancies by or positions by department that are going to be cut. So that was the document from last week, and then I'm posting now an updated document from 2 days ago that was reviewed at the board with, I believe there's any changes, but some new information based on Board of Supervisor requests from last week.
That's right. And so SEMA has been present every step of the way at the board. While I was somewhat surprised by yesterday's decision, I was pleasantly surprised is the wrong word, but gratified that the board supported our position with regards to the CEO's office. We were able to save, for those, if there's anyone on the call from the CEO's office, the Intergovernmental Affairs Office from getting 3 out of their 4 staff cut, and a much smaller department called IPM, or Integrated Pest Management, that was wholly saved from deletion as well. However, what did surprise me at yesterday's meeting was that the board endorsed Assessor Stone's plan to reorganize his department, which will realize about 4 layoffs because of the reorganization. Now, I also want to be clear, because oftentimes there's confusion about this. When I say layoff, that means, and whenever Adam or I say layoff, or the county says layoff, that means you go through the layoff process. It does not mean you're out the door. That if you get a layoff slip, that means you go through the layoff process. It doesn't mean I have now lost my job and I'm on unemployment. So that's a benefit of a unionized environment. That's a benefit of the SEMA contract, right? Is that there are many, many steps that you go through prior to losing that. Right now, there's plenty of vacant funded positions in the county, thousands still. They're cutting about 1,000 in this cycle. So you will have a place to land if you're one of the few people impacted by this layoff round. So don't think that that means you're out the door. It means that you go through the layoff process. And we have a whole video that I'll post when Adam's talking about the next issue on what does that layoff process look like. As I mentioned, we're happy to meet with folks and walk them through what happens. Down the road is when we get a seniority list. What are the vacant positions that you can claim? What's your seniority? Can you actually just bump someone to get a position, and so forth? Again, we're talking about a universe after our successful lobbying, we're talking about a universe of like 11, 12 people. So this isn't a huge group of folks, but we want to make sure everyone's aware of it so that you're educated about what a layoff process really means. Also, with regards to the budget, we've been urging the county not to spend money voluntarily. We've received responses. The board is totally split on this issue. We've received responses from board members saying, absolutely, I want to put a complete stop to discretionary spending, to I'm not interested in that. The real issue is the cost of the hospital, or I'm not interested in that. The real issue is property taxes, and so forth. So we've heard very, very frank responses from people, board personalities on both sides of that issue. Here's a great example. For those that have been paying attention, right now the board is contemplating spending $100 million on small business loans to get businesses through this current COVID crisis. That's $100 million, which means that represents approximately a little bit more than that, about 550 positions if we take an average. So that's a lot, right? That's a lot of positions. But that's something that the board is contemplating doing with one-time funds. So we're advocating against that, not necessarily against specifically small business loans. We realize there has to be a need to support our community, but we don't like this spending in the face of cuts. So some probably less controversial examples are the like ADA accessible playgrounds, an important issue, something everybody wants. Maybe now is not the right time to be spending dollars on that. Gender equal statues, also an issue that is of some interest to the community, probably not something we want to be spending money on right now.
And just a quick explanation on the math Zeb was doing in his head there. You can roughly say the average county employee costs about $170,000. That's not the average salary for a county employee, but when you factor in costs of the pension and roll-ups and benefits and everything else, that's roughly what it costs for the average county employee. So that's the math that we use when we say, the county wants to spend $100 million on something. Divide that by $170,000 and you get, 580 something employees, I think, is what that ends up looking like at the end of the day. Obviously, on average, SEMA folks are a little bit more expensive. We have some of the higher salaries in the county, but that's kind of the back of the envelope math there.
And so let's go ahead and open it. As always with these meetings, anyone who's on, feel free to type messages. We do have more than 50 people on the call, so I ask that you just type the message to everybody unless it has to be confidential, and we'll answer whatever questions you have. Um, and usually our guideline is under 50 folks. Feel free to unmute and just chat. With more than 50 folks, we like to just have it in the comments. So please, if you have questions on the budget, let us know. We did author several white papers and advocacy pieces, and that has yielded some positive results. As Adam pointed out, apparently I had the misfortune of having all those be in my area, but that's how it goes. And I think that leads us nicely into voluntary separation incentive program,
Yep.
which does have a significant impact on the budget. Do you want to take a minute to start talking about that, Adam?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think the big news on this is that what we're not what we're seeing necessarily, but what we're hearing and expecting to see in the near future is that there's been a greater approval rate for VISIP than we were anticipating. And honestly, I think greater than the folks in ESA who we bargained this with were anticipating. And there's likely a few reasons for that. But to remind folks of the background here, our expectation and what we advised folks of heading into VISIP, right, is that the intent for this was to only be incentivizing folks to leave in cases where that position is definitely going or extremely likely to be eliminated as a vacancy once the occupant retires from the position. And the point being that that's the mechanism by which the county saves money through a deal like this, right? So they are effectively giving you a chunk, or if you leave in March, almost the entirety of whatever you had budgeted for your position for this fiscal year as an incentive to leave. But then on the back end of that, they can close the vacancy out, and then it will not be a recurring cost for the future for the next fiscal year and on. And we know there were a number of departments that are just very unlikely, one of our classifications too, there's very unlikely to see positions closed from them. For example, our nursing classifications, right? We've got a number of folks put in from nursing classifications, but the county needs to be staffing up nurses, not letting them go. Any position that's vacated needs to be reposted and refilled. And if that's the case, then the county is very likely not coming out ahead in that calculation. However, we've now heard there's a little bit north of 400 county employees who have put in for VISIP. And that's not just SEMA, right? There were similar agreements that were reached with SEIU, 1587, UAPD, engineers and architects. I think most unions had some kind of agreement. I think RNPA might be the exception, again, because the county just doesn't need to incentivize nurses to leave right now.
And VPG.
And VPG, thanks. However, we're not sure yet what the particular portion of that is for how many SEMA folks have applied. We could make an educated guess based on how many folks at the county are in SEMA compared to overall, but we don't have that number yet. We should see it fairly soon. It's one of the terms of the VISIP agreement that we signed that we'll get those numbers shortly. But we're hearing there's a close to 100% approval rate thus far for folks who are putting in. And it's possible what OBA is seeing in the calculation here is that when they have folks who have put in with a request to leave, as soon as possible or at the beginning of January, even if someone, even if there isn't an intent to close that position out, the county will still be up net ahead for this fiscal year. For example, if you leave December 10th and the county is only paying you 3 months salary to do it, there's still another 3 months of salary effectively budgeted for you for this year that would be represented as savings this fiscal year. So it's possible that's the calculus that they're making. The alternative is just that there's positions that they're expecting to have some impact from layoffs come February, March, and that having these vacancies will be a benefit for folks to move into. However, the main point is I think we're surprised to see the high approval rate thus far. So that's great for the folks who are applying for and interested in it, that there's going to be a high approval rate. It's a good benefit for folks, and we're happy to see it. Of course, we'll want to see what the actual numbers are, one of folks that end up getting approved, and then two, what percentage of those vacancies do end up being actually eliminated at the end of this. We know anecdotally, just from talking to SEMA folks, I think we expect that 400 number to rise. I know maybe a half dozen people who are anticipating putting in still before the close off date who haven't yet put in, folks who might be, in the middle of an interview process for another position somewhere else nearby and just want to make sure that they're fairly assured that that's going to materialize before they put in here. But I think what's important for folks to know is that, or remember, is that in the VISIP agreement, once you submit that application, you're locked in. The bars on the roller coaster have come down, and if they send you forward, you're going forward on that, right? And now that we know there's going to be a very high approval rate, you should anticipate being approved. So put in for VISIP if you're sure that that's what you want to do. And yeah, I think we'll expect to see a good number of SEMA folks approved. Any questions on VISIP that came in while I was talking? Did you see any there, Zeb?
Yeah, and I responded to AD. If you do have the ability, please right click and put in your full name. AD, to your question, will we publish the number of people taking the separation? Yeah, as soon as we get the information, we'll be sharing. I shouldn't say as soon as. We'll likely get a partial list this Friday. We're probably not going to publish that, not because we're trying to keep it secret, just because we don't want to flood everyone's inbox with unnecessary information. But as the picture sort of comes into focus, we want to share that with folks so you know. So what we will do is share a comprehensive list as soon as we have it. We'll certainly know at the end of this month, right? Because that's the deadline to apply. And we'll share as soon as we have it. The county owes it to us by mid-December, December 14th is their estimate, but they'll likely get it to us quicker than that. What we will do, of course, is we'll redact people's names. We just, position and where they are is probably sufficient for folks to kind of understand. And then if you're someone that has a leadership role in a department, you can also kind of see, oh, look, 10 people from Department X are leaving, good to know. I better talk to my director about that, because who's going to pave the roads, or whatever the issue might be. So also included in the chat, I posted our mechanics of layoff discussion, which myself, Adam, and Rebecca hosted a couple months back. Obviously it's a couple months back because Rebecca's no longer with us, with SEMA. I shouldn't say with us, with SEMA. She took a job locally, as many of you know. And the mechanics of the layoff don't change. There's an out-of-date budgetary assessment there, so you can feel free to ignore that, but just do pay attention to the actual mechanics of the layoff, which remain constant because it's all enshrined right here in our handy-dandy contract, which explains exactly how the layoffs are administered. The more people that participate in VISIP, the greater the savings are for the county. And that's been our objective from day one, is let's make the cuts as voluntary as possible. Voluntary separation incentive means some number of people will be incentivized to leave. If we can get voluntary reduced work hours, which everyone has access to now, when and if the budget gets worse, then we may be looking at furloughs or voluntary long-term leaves. Those are all things we really want to look at before positions run out. Let's see. I don't see any other questions here. As a strong admonition or reminder to folks, if you're interested in VISIP, put in now. Don't wait until the very, very end, of November. Also, we've gotten a fair number, not a whole lot, but I've gotten probably a half dozen people asking, can I ask for a separation prior to March 7th? Absolutely. The language, which I posted here as well, is the last day you can retire is March 7th. You can retire much sooner than that. And the county, just today, we were talking with the head of labor relations and also Jeff in our monthly labor management meeting with him. He was saying, Dr. Smith was saying, as soon as we can reasonably accommodate somebody leaving, we will do it. So if someone wanted to leave December 20th, December 15th, as long as they can process everything and go, then they will. Okay, I see a question from Rebecca. Do you want to go ahead, Adam?
Yeah, I can take that.
Okay.
So Rebecca was asking that she thought they were going to hold applications until the due date so that they could be processed in line with the language. So folks should remember, right? One of the things that we had added into the VISIP is that if there's multiple conflicting applications, so for example, say Zeb and I are both county employees and we both put in for the VISIP. The county decides they can spare one of us, but not two of us. How do they decide which person is approved? It goes by seniority, is what the VISIP agreement seen assigned says. However, say I put in before Zeb, he has more seniority than me, and I get approved before the due date. What does that mean? So I don't think we'll expect to see responses back to employees come out until that closure date for that reason. If for some reason that does happen, from our perspective, the county would then be obligated to approve the person with greater seniority, regardless whether or not they approve the person with less seniority. I think we'd have to look and see whether we felt it was an option for them to rescind when they shouldn't have approved. I think we deal with that on a case-by-case basis when it came up. But yes, we will be enforcing the language we sign that says the more senior person does get approved.
That's right. And that very clearly is included in the language and is one of the components of the language that is subject to grievance and consequently arbitration. So it's a good question, Rebecca, that if the county, as Adam points out, approved a less senior person and then denied the more senior person in the same code, they wouldn't be able to do that. They're just mechanically not able to do that.
A question from Jose here, taking us on to the next agenda item to do with layoff notices. And the question was, for folks who received layoff notices, will they be able to bump people out of coded positions? It's a theoretical possibility, yes, but keep in mind from the explanations on how the layoff process works, people first have a right to claim vacancies. And it's if they're unable to claim a vacancy that their ability to displace someone else would come into effect, right? So yes, it's a possibility. I would guess people likely aren't going to be displacing anyone during this round of cuts because, as Zeb said, there's more than 2,000 vacancies around the county, and employees and members first have rights to vacancies before they have a right to displace someone or bump someone less senior from them and claim their position. And then secondarily, keep in mind that anyone who is impacted in such a way where they are displaced, so say Zeb comes over and bumps me out of my position, I then have all the rights that someone affected by a layoff would have to claim any vacancies or rights to underlying positions that I have underlying status in, or even a right to bump someone else down the chain, right? So it's a long shuffling process. And I don't think we're expecting to see that start during this November round of cuts, given the number of vacancies.
That's right. And the video that we posted has a lot of documentation about exactly what process is followed. Very briefly, and it would take half an hour to review this. So I'm just going to very, very briefly explain. Pretend you're in a department of 100 people. You're all in the same budget unit, just to make things simple. There are 5 management analysts. The department is cutting 1 management analyst. What should happen is the least senior management analyst gets cut. So that way you're not instantly bumping somebody else, right? That's the first thing that should happen. The least senior person. Seniority for us is days of service, okay? So it's not time and position. Position doesn't matter for us as it does for some other unions. So then the least senior person, they go through, and this is in section 15.6 of our contract. So what happens first? First, you look around for a vacant position that's funded. Of course, it has to be funded. You're not trying to get an unfunded position. And it should be in the same classification, and that's countywide. So in this example, management analyst, you look around the whole county. Are there any vacancies? Oh, look, there's 5. You get a list of what the responsibilities are for those 5, and you claim 1. Okay, done. Now let's pretend there are none. You look around the whole county, there's no management analyst positions. Okay, Then you go to your prior classification. In my example, you were a management analyst. You used to be an associate management analyst. Now you can bump with, or you can claim that, excuse me, you can claim those vacancies within your department or county, so also countywide. If there still are no vacancies, then you can be returned to any classification that you previously held permanent status in at any time in the county. That's only within your department, and then you can bump people. So in that circumstance, you can say, I'm going down to an AMA. That person in that occupied code has 1 year seniority. I have 5. Get out of my way. I'm claiming that code. You'd be nicer about it than that, but that's mechanically how it works. Then, and this is most likely what would happen instead, is you would go to in-placement, which is where, again, you look around the whole county, not just within your department, the whole county, and you say, what classifications do I meet the minimum qualifications for? Oh, I'm a management analyst. I can be a program manager 1. I can qualify for an ASO 1 or whatever it might be. And then you can get those positions as well. So that's a super abbreviated version of what happens, but I just want to be clear to everybody that there's a process, it's robust. There's a lot of options out there right now because there are still plenty of vacancies. We're not in there are no vacancies. Everyone's just bumping each other out of the way.
There was a question from Nellie that came in asking if a person gets approved for VISIP, is that position deleted? So it's not required to be deleted. That was something that we bargained into the VISIP agreement. It says it's up to the county's discretion whether they delete it or not. And I think folks have heard that, 1 from us earlier today, but 2, I think on the last call that Jeff and Miguel did about this, they're leaving the possibility open that positions will not be deleted if there's savings that can be justified from, for example, the position being vacant for a little while, turning over someone who's step 5 or 6, classic PERS into a new hire who's going to be step 1 PEPRA. So it's not required that positions are going to be deleted. I think we should anticipate most of them being deleted, though.
Yeah, I agree with that, Adam. I would even take a little more aggressive stance. I think the quote that Jeff has been circulating to the board is 99% of the time the position will be deleted. If you heard the hearings, they're not hearings, the board meetings that occurred Monday and Tuesday of this week, many supervisors, specifically Simidian and Wasserman, as well as Ellenberg, were all saying it doesn't make sense to delete a position or to pay someone to leave if you're then not going to delete the position. So the board at least is making publicly its position known on that as well. The agreement that we have, as Adam correctly points out, leaves the possibility that they could not delete it, but I think we should anticipate most of the time it will be. Almost all the time, I think is probably a safer statement, almost all the time.
Question from Joe asking, it sounds like we'll have furloughs in the future. Do we have an estimated timeline? And I would say, no, I wouldn't say that's an assumption at this point that we're going to have furloughs. I think we're trying to be, sanguine about, what the budget looks like right now. And that there's a $200 million question mark sitting out there in 2021, right? And the budget has to balance at the end of the year. So there's there's other possibilities beyond that, right? There's still a lot of vacancies out there. It's possible there's some support that materializes at the federal or state level. I think that's what a number of folks on the Board of Supervisors are hoping for. If nothing else good happens and we end up having to look at additional cuts and the possibility of furloughs, it would be some way into 2021. We couldn't give an exact timeline, and it's also just not clear that it's going to happen, right? But what we can say is that we had that list of priorities from the survey that we put out to SEMA members. What was that, 3 months ago now? Kind of outlining if we end up looking at a serious round of layoffs where folks could be going out the door, which is not where we're at right now, right? Folks being impacted almost assuredly will land in a position. But if we're looking at substantial layoffs with the possibility of folks walking out the door, what would SEMA folks like to see instead? And that rank order choice right at the top of that list was bargain some kind of separation agreement. So that's checked off now. And then below that were other options, including some sort of voluntary reduction in work hours that folks could opt into, I believe was the next most popular. Then below that, we had furloughs, and then things of not much interest, right, were just taking the layoffs or, deferring wage increases, bargaining lower wage increases in the contract, right? All those things were fairly unpopular as options. So if we're in 2021 coming up on the next budget, those are the priorities that we'll bring forward into any talks with labor relations prior to cuts.
And also, so short response to that is SEMA members have articulated a preference for furloughs. I see Kent just added there that we had a bad experience with furloughs in the last round. I would tend to agree with that. They didn't realize the amount of savings we thought they would, because oftentimes overtime is then required, things like that. However, that was clearly a preference of the SEMA membership with our survey, furloughs before other forms of cuts. I think that the board and administration is generally opposed to furloughs. Doesn't mean they wouldn't do it before laying people off, but that they generally don't like the idea. What I've heard from administration and from the board is this is a long-term structural problem. Furloughs are designed to address a short-term budgetary need to get over a particular hump, whereas they believe that COVID and the ensuing economic damage are long-term, not going to be resolved in a quarter or something, a quarter or two.
And yeah, and just to add on to that, folks thinking back to the last recession that was shortly before Dr. Smith came in, right? That was kind of the beginning of his tenure with the county, was dealing with the financial crisis and the fallout. And as Kent was saying in chat there was a bad experience with furloughs. And he's made clear that that's not going to be his preference, likely because there were so many cases where they ended up costing more money than they saved, right? So I think what we could anticipate is if we do end up looking at furloughs, it assuredly wouldn't look like they did back in 2009 as kind of an across the board thing, but possibly in a more targeted fashion might be something that was more appealing to the current administration and the board. I think it's very unlikely that we'd end up seeing something like what happened in 2008-9.
And yeah. The next item, I'm actually getting a flurry of about, I don't know if flurry is the right word, but about 5 direct messages to me of individual members weighing in on liking or disliking furloughs. Yeah, just so you know, that's why we did a unit-wide survey. I realized there are very strong opinions on any type of a layoff or classification action, furloughs, voluntary reduced workout, whatever it might be. Likely, as the budget situation matures, we'll probably have another survey about this once we have to make much more targeted decisions, right? Now that a VSIP has been offered, now that we will have a better idea of what the Biden administration is going to do and what Governor Newsom is going to do in their revisions of the budget. We've got this double dip COVID bump, which is indicating that COVID's here for a long period of time. This isn't just, a season or something. So yeah, we'll definitely repoll the membership, or I would like to repoll the membership as we get closer to a decision point on this. The next item I think is pretty quick, which is, hey, if you've been impacted by layoffs, contact me. There's my contact information. It's easiest if you text me. I've met with, I feel like most people, and I've got two meetings this afternoon with at least 4 people. So I feel like that will be almost everybody that I've met with or talked to about the layoffs. But if you know anyone who has been hit, they're one of those mid-teen folks, 14, 15 folks, text or call me here, and I will have either an individual meeting or one with you and your colleague or whatever that happened to be impacted. At this point, I haven't asked Adam to step in and help because they are all in departments that I'm representing. But Adam's well versed in all this as well if we do need to split up some of it. Okay, what's the next item? Let me go back and look at the agenda.
The class committee.
Okay, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I believe this e-blast went out. I know at least I've had a couple of folks reach out to me requesting to be on the committee. But I'll give folks a quick run through on it, which is that we have, as everyone I'm sure will recall, a new language in SEMA's MOU that says we have a new process for completing class studies. The old process was you would submit a request, and then 3 or 4 years later, you'd get a response on it, which was not ideal. So the new process is that we have a guaranteed 1-year turnaround time on them, but we can submit 30 class studies per year. Again, that doesn't mean 30 people. The definition of class study is a little vague, and it's something that we'll be working out with ESA and HR this first time through the language. But for example, we had a look at ITCC that was referred to as one class study by the county, right, under their definition. Now, we're not going to convince them to study every single IT code again as part of one class study from our 30, but it gives you a sense of kind of the breadth of that definition. That being said, there's a couple things that we need to be doing right now. The first one is the language dictates that the way we select which 30 class studies go through is through a committee of both folks from SEMA and a couple folks from ESA HR. Our intent with that is that prior to sitting down with ESA next year, we want our group to have already met and vetted the applications for class studies. The reason for that being that we want to use this bandwidth for our priorities, for SEMA's priorities. ESA and HR have their own classifications that they may want to have studied for various reasons of maintaining and keeping up to date their class study process, or there might be ones that various executives have as a priority. But we want to remember is that ESA of their own accord, whenever they want, can and does initiate class studies. Likewise, heads of agencies and executives can of their own accord initiate class studies. So we want to be using our bandwidth for things that we need to be pushing because they won't get attention otherwise. We don't want to let them double dip on things they're going to already be doing anyway, effectively, right? At the same time, though, we want to be putting class studies forward that have a reasonable likelihood of success, of having some kind of positive outcome for the members who are putting in. So the goal of the committee will be to take in applications, vet them, and then select 30 that we're going to move forward with to HR in probably February of 2021. So we're looking for about 10 folks to sit on this committee. There's been a number of SEMA board members who have already expressed interest in being on. I think we had three or four. So still plenty of space on there. And we're looking to get members that will have a fairly, or will represent a wide breadth of experience and knowledge across the county, right? So not 6 people all from SSA who are very familiar with only those classifications, but folks that'll represent a wide breadth of experience. It'll be a reasonable to moderate time commitment, at least a handful of meetings with the committee, some time spent reviewing the applications that come in. In addition, we're doing a training on December 4th from 11 to 1, where we'll be going through kind of how ESA looks at class studies and what their criteria are for making adjustments either to classifications or to salaries and whatnot, so that folks are well educated on what, well, one, how requests for class study should look, and then 2, what kind of things make one ripe for study as opposed to unlikely to result in anything positive for our folks. So if you're interested in being on the class committee, reach out to myself or Zeb. We've had a few folks reach out already. And we'll be happy to take a look at including you. The only other caveat I would add is if you are intending on putting in a request for your classification, specifically, please don't use the committee as a way to ensure that your classification gets approved and included. We'll for sure be asking anyone who's part of a classification up for review to definitely recuse yourself if you end up on the committee and there's a request from somewhere else that comes in, someone else in your class. Um, and yeah, I think that's pretty much everything on that. Secondarily, the training will also be giving some assistance on for folks who are going to be filling out the applications to submit for a request. And that'll be posted up on YouTube after the training is completed. So there'll be a resource there for anyone who'd like to fill out an application and submit for. And I'm not sure if we have any folks from Tasman that fall in this group, but there's Zeb and I have a list going that's got maybe, I don't know, a dozen or so people who over the last year have said, hey, I want to be included and here's my PCQ. And maybe it was, we've seen ESA just be rejecting requests since we signed this new language. We're not going to add any more with this new process pending. So if you've already submitted, documentation there, and as far as you're pending being included, best bet would just be to reach out to myself or Zeb, whoever you spoke with, to ensure that you're not missed. And the new form is a little bit different from the standard PCQ. So we'll take a look at it and see if there's any other information we think the committee will need to make a good assessment there.
And it's on my list of things to do today, Adam. I believe we're going to have that audit committee article come out today in an e-blast.
Okay.
Is that correct, that the article is finalized? I just need to.
It is. Sorry. You said audit committee though? I mean, class.
Oh, I did say audit committee, which is another thing we have to do. I did not intend to announce that to this group. It's nothing secret or anything, but the classification committee article.
Yeah, that's already finalized. If it hasn't gone out yet, it should go out.
Great. And yeah, I just saw a question come in from Philip Decker, who's saying, any chance of getting ESA to commit to a reasonable timeline? Yeah, so that's why we had the language be reviewed, right, and renegotiated in this contract. The price that we paid to have a reasonable timeline, which is now less than a year, and I'll explain why it's less than a year, is we can no longer submit at any time. We can only submit at the beginning of the year. And then we are limited to 30 class studies. And however, the benefit is that those class studies get turned around. We have to submit them by the end of February. They get turned over technically by the end of March if we really pushed it. And then they get turned around by November of that year. So less than a year processing time, but limited to 30. So that's one of the reasons we added that negotiation or added that feature. Let's see. Go ahead.
There's, and I wasn't sure if you were speaking to folks that are currently pending. We still have, I don't know, 40 pending class studies, I want to say. I have to look real quick and see exactly how many. And it's, I think we're going to see a good number of those wrapped up before March of the coming year. That's when they'll have to start working on their new ones. There's no guarantee that if you're currently pending the completion of a class study, it will be done by then. But I would say we're seeing a lot of these turnover fairly quickly now compared to at least what it's been for the last year.
That's right. Nellie asks, what's the SEMA response for classification studies that were approved as a result of ITCC or in process? They're low priority for us. These are class studies that are pending. Why they're low priority is that we don't have any enforceable contract language on them. We've continued to cajole and jump up and down in front of ESA at our monthly meetings with them, but we don't have any enforceable language. So we're asking them to hasten their process. You're very aware, Nellie, of the ongoing processes with your particular study that you're referring to here. And anyone else who has a class study that's pending, we can ask, we can't file a grievance, we can't take it to arbitration. That's one of the reasons for the language change, is that now there's real teeth that we have when and if ESA violates any of the timelines. So we're trying to push them, but we're pushing them in a political or soft way. And it just is not a priority for the union right now when we're looking at these budgetary cuts and people experiencing layoffs. That's really where we're putting the bulk of our energy at the moment. Okay, which I apologize to. I realize that's probably an unsatisfactory answer. a truthful but probably unsatisfying answer to people who really are waiting on some of those studies. Okay, I think the last item we had lobbying effort, and then with the reorganizations. Okay, both of these are relatively quick, I believe, but I'll go. Okay, so lobbying effort, we've been spending a lot of time. We've written a number of white papers in attempts to shield various members from layoffs that have come. We got great success with that in IPM and intergovernmental affairs. Not so great in terms of impact to TSS as an example, or impact in the assessor's office, which bleeds into the reorg discussion. The assessor's reorganizing his department. It's a layoff. He's calling it a reorg. He's moving a couple of pieces around and then laying off 4 people, 4 SEMA people and about 20 SEIU people. It was a toss-up as to whether or not we would have the votes on the board. In a 2-3 vote on the board against, or rather pro-adoption, I should say, the board adopted the assessor's language. So he is going to be able to go forward with his reorganization. There's plenty of positions for these folks. So they're generally generic codes, right? Where there's one data engineer, there's one management analyst, one associate management analyst, which are ubiquitous and all over the county, and a supervisor. So they'll be able to find positions. It's just, it's disruptive to everything. In one case, they'll likely just move to a different unit in the assessor's office. So I wanted to share good results from the board on in terms of several offices, unexpected result, somewhat with regards to the assessor. And then also I want to just impress upon all of you that we're already reaching out, not already reaching out, we have already reached out, and Otto Lee will be joining us for a board meeting, a SEMA internal board meeting, and we're going to be deepening our relationship with him. As you know, we had a dual endorsement of Otto Lee and of Kenson Chu. Kenson Chu lost to Otto Lee, so Otto Lee is the incoming Board of Supervisor for replacing Dave Cortese, who also was successful in his bid to become to go to the state legislature. So he'll be up there. And we're looking forward to continuing to work with him in a statewide capacity, although that has a limited impact to Santa Clara County. It's extremely important in these times of discussing how HEROES, CARES Act money and so forth will be distributed, and especially trying to avoid the mistakes of the past where some of that money got funneled to San Jose, even though San Jose wasn't really meaningfully providing care as we were because of our role with the hospital system. Please send, someone is just posting, thank you for the info. Oh, have to go, please link to the recorded meeting. Yeah, we'll send out the link. In fact, Adam, if that gets uploaded today, we can send it out in the e-blast today.
Yep.
If that's up already.
Yep.
Okay, then lastly, reorganizations. It doesn't really, we're not going to spend just a minute talking about this, because this isn't a site meeting that really involves the 2 areas that are being reorged. Were this the combined 70 West meeting, we'd spend a lot of time talking about the assessor's office, 15 minutes or so. Were this behavioral health, we'd spend a lot of time talking about that. Rest assured, we've had plenty of meetings with those departments as well, but significant reorganizations are going on in both of those areas. And the sophistication of the county in terms of reorg, at least with these 2 examples, I'm very pleased with. They're furnishing accurate pre and post org charts, has really been upped compared to past reorgs, and this is kind of our expectation rolling forward. So those reorgs are coming. That I was going to conclude it there, but I have a question coming in right now. SEMA members completed a survey a while ago. Can you please briefly share the results? Joe, can you clarify which survey that's referencing? We had 2 or 3 that are recent. Which survey is that? You can type or unmute since we're at the tail end of the meeting here. Do you know what survey he's referring to, Adam? You're muted, Adam.
There were two that came out recently. There was the um, priorities for layoffs. Well, they're not priorities. The priorities that we should bring forward into budget cut discussions with the county for alternatives to layoffs, which I think we summarized a little earlier, right? And that was, golden handshake at the top.
Yeah, that's the one
Followed
he's
by
asking about. That's the
yeah,
one he's asking.
yeah, followed by voluntary reduction in work hours, and then furloughs, and then deferring a wage increase, and then rebargaining the contract, and then layoffs at the bottom. I believe there were six options, and that was the rank order. And they weren't close. And that was a
Yeah.
pretty firm order.
Okay, great. Well, I'm glad we could get you that information. Again, we will, when and if there's sort of another nexus point as to a policy decision, we'll have a further survey, follow-up survey, if you will, on those as priorities in the budget shifts. But okay, we're just a moment over. Thank you all for your kind attention. And I really appreciate everyone sticking together in this tough time. Also, before we sign off, I just want to let you know, SEMA is so deeply respected at the Board of Supervisor level. So I know sometimes maybe it doesn't feel like that to a lot of you, or maybe you're upset with your boss or something like that. But the county administration at the highest levels really appreciates the excellent work you all have done, not only during this period of time in COVID, but distributing, laptops, mobile devices, getting people able to participate and work from home, and just generally supporting the county through all this. It's been a big benefit to everybody. Okay, thank you. Oh, did you want to say anything in closing, Adam?
No, I think you hit everything. And again, that's the leverage that makes it easier for us to bargain and lobby and get things from the board, right? And that's a reflection on all the great work everyone here is doing.
Yep, excellent. And yeah, someone's saying thank you. Of course, thank you for all your thanks. Happy Thanksgiving. Yes, happy Thanksgiving to everyone. Be safe. I'm sure you're all aware of the various health advisories and so forth. So try not to travel everywhere and kiss everybody, but do what you can. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Take care.